Who are you and what are you doing here?
I'm Jesse Wente. I'm the head of film programs for TIFF LightBox, and more importantly for this current conversation, I'm the curator of the First Peoples Cinema 1500 Nations One Tradition show, and as well as the co-curator of the Home on Native Land gallery exhibition that accompanies the film program.
This was in part your idea to have it be both an art exhibit as well as a film conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I started thinking about this show probably when I first saw Adam Arjo at the Fast Runner 11 years ago now, and it started getting me thinking about the history of First Peoples on screen. And you know, at the time, shortly thereafter, I started working with the Imaginative Film Festival and got to see all this great work being produced, and it's just been percolating over the years about how we would look at the history of this cinema as it developed. And it's good we waited, because so many great movies have been made in the ensuing 10 years since Fast Runner. And then really started thinking about this show a couple of years ago as something we would do here at the TIFF LightBox. And as the film program started to take shape and really started to look at the commonality in terms of themes and issues and techniques that the filmmakers share, despite the fact that they're quite literally a world apart often, you know, and yet they have this unity around what they're trying to say, that it started to occur to me that also is true on the visual arts side, and that Lightbox as a place that has both a gallery and cinemas is really built for this exact type of show. And you know, when it was really decided that that's what we should do, that we should really blow this out and try to have this giant show to really draw attention to this movement, you know, I thought of Steve, who I've known for a number of years, and who was always sort of my counterbalance on the visual arts side, and we really teamed up to put this together. So I'm really thrilled how it all came through. Lots of work that's never been shown in Toronto before, lots of work that's never been shown in Canada before, and I think really connects very well with what's going on in the cinemas and expressing a real whole history of, you know, the last 40 years of Indigenous art all over the world.
That it isn't just Canadian Indigenous that we're talking about.
Yeah, we're really talking about the countries now known anyway as Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia, which is where the primary centers of production for First Peoples cinema have existed. That's where most of the movies have been made. And so we really wanted to have artists from all those four regions represented, not just in the movie theater, but also in the gallery show. And the fact that they are very interrelated, that the work speaks to one another, they're really connected, I think really comes through in both shows.
There is a lot of similarities. Like, you wouldn't say, oh, that is this Indigenous culture. I find that very interesting, how there is such a unity to that conversation.
Yeah, and you know, and in fact, I think if you know, just changed the faces in some of the films, you wouldn't necessarily, or change the accents, you wouldn't necessarily know that an Australian film couldn't also exist in Canada, and that a New Zealand film couldn't also exist in the US. I think that's very much what we're expressing within the show, and the fact that these movies have, you know, very often in the history as they've come out, been related to their country of origins history. So you look at a movie like Smoke Signals, and it was traditionally talked about in terms of independent cinema in the United States. I'm actually more interested in its relationship to this larger global movement of First Peoples cinema, which is not as talked about, because I think that film is a direct response and a direct connection to a lot of the other movies, whether it's Walkabout or something like Nati or something like Dances with Wolves. I think the movie connects all of those things, and so I think that's the sort of dialogue we wanted to create, literally in cinema, with the movies playing, you know, one after the other or beside each other, and really create for the audience a different way of viewing movies that they may have already seen before or movies that are new to them.
I have to say, I've read the lineup of what the films are, and it's awesome. For one thing, really hard to get a hold of a lot of these films.
That's for sure. It took a year and a half to coordinate getting all the movies, and you know, particularly some of the films from places like New Zealand and Australia, Many of them have never been shown in North America. In particular, I'm thinking of a film called Manawaka from New Zealand, which is this extraordinary movie made by Marietta Mita, who's very much their Alanisa Bomsawin, documentary filmmaker that started working in the 70s. She constructed this movie from ethnographic footage shot in the late 30s, so silent film footage shot of the centenary, the build-up to the centenary of New Zealand. 50 years later, she processed the movie, re-edited it, or actually edited it, and then added a Foley score that she created. So every time you hear an axe strike in the movie, she made that sound and connected it with the film. It's a movie that's never been shown in Canada because the community, the Maori people that are in the film, own it. And so it doesn't really travel. And so it took a long time to get that movie here, but I actually think it's a movie that really will speak to a lot of First Peoples from no matter where they are, and just people in general, because it is an extraordinary film, an extraordinary moment of cultural reclamation and rebuilding by one of the most prominent artists in the whole show. And so, stuff like that took a long time to organize, but that's really the idea of a show like this, is to make sure we can collect movies that many people may not have seen or have been impossible to see, and actually show them to you so you understand the history of where movies like Fast Runner or Samson and Delilah actually come from.
Yeah, and I'm kind of excited to see the trilogy as well, because you kind of get it in pieces, you know what I mean? So it'll be nice to come and watch all three at once.
Yeah, this was the first time that they've all been shown together, so anywhere in the world. Wow. So, on Friday night we show both Fast Runner and Journals back to back, both made by the same filmmakers, and I think really interesting to see the progression. And then the next day we show Before Tomorrow, so you can actually experience it within 2 days, the entire Fast Runner trilogy. And I think that was also something really exciting. I mean, Zach is one of the leading figures in this entire cinema movement, and these are landmark films in terms of this. They're movies that really altered the course of this cinema worldwide, and I think it was actually important to see them all together because they are a trilogy, and yet when else are you ever actually going to get a chance to do that?
Well, I haven't. I know that much.
Yeah, maybe at home if you have all the DVDs you could do that, but this is, this you get to have the in-theater experience and have the proper popcorn.
The last thing I wanted to mention too was about Real Engine, which came out 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
It's an incredible documentary, and it kind of to me has the overall arc of what your point is here, which is about telling that story, that First People's story within cinema. So can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, Real Engine, of course, is a movie I've been involved with for a number of years. It was a movie that really needed to be made. It had been a long time coming, a film like that, in terms of addressing the mishistory that was on cinema for the previous 100 or so years. And for me, including it was a way to kick off part of the dialogue around the history of representation, because I actually think, movies made by non-Indigenous people but about First Peoples are a shared history with the actual First Peoples cinema. They're not divorced from one another. They're actually very interconnected. And I wanted to acknowledge that these movies really do have a place. It may not be the place we want, and so sometimes it's about repositioning these movies for the audience. And so for Real Engine, we wanted to show it because I think it encapsulates that entire history. And then on Friday, I'm actually going to give a lecture around the film of sort of what happened after the movie came out, because I do think Real Engine is a summation of something, but I think what happened afterwards and what's followed in the ensuing years is a bit of a reminder not to forget one of the key points of what Real Engine's really about, and the fact that maybe that movie, it should have a continued life, because clearly we need to keep reminding people of that history.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was wonderful.
Great to meet you, and thanks for coming to see the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Go see it.
Yes.
Yeah, you tell them.
Go see First People's Cinema, 1500 Nations, One Tradition, only at TIFF LightBox.
You want my job? That was great.